content, you are not concerned. When I walk into Congress every single day, you know why I don't feel a way and why you can't make me doubt who I am? Is because I know that I had to work 10 times as hard as they did just to get into the seat. When you look and you compare me to Marjorie Taylor Greene or me to Lauren Boebert, there is no comparison. And that is the life that we have always lived.
In today's era of information explosion, identifying what is truth and what is political strategy becomes increasingly difficult. The American political landscape in recent years has witnessed one of the most turbulent and controversial periods in modern history. Policy decisions, leadership styles, and economic impacts have left profound impressions not only on American citizens, but have also influenced the global economy. The complex interplay between rhetoric and reality, between promised outcomes and actual results, creates a fascinating yet concerning picture of modern governance. As we navigate through the maze of political statements, economic data, and policy impacts, it becomes crucial to separate facts from political positioning to understand the true state of affairs. Let's delve deeper into analyzing prominent issues in recent American politics, from controversial leadership styles to the economic impacts of foreign policies and tariffs, and examine how these elements have shaped the current American landscape. One of the most prominent characteristics in recent American politics is the highly confident leadership style, sometimes perceived as arrogance. On numerous occasions, we've heard statements like, "I had to work 10 times harder than them to get this position." This self-aggrandizement raises questions about the true motivation behind positions of power. Is it for the national interest, or simply to protect personal status? Many political analysts have pointed out that there is a clear distinction between working for the common good and working to maintain personal power. When a leader consistently compares themselves to extreme politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, it seems more like an effort to build a personal image rather than address the country's real issues. This approach to leadership has created a narrative where personal achievement overshadows public service. The constant emphasis on personal struggle and sacrifice can resonate with some voters who see it as determination, while others view it as self-promotion that distracts from substantive policy discussions. The question becomes whether such leadership truly serves the people or merely reinforces a personality cult that divides rather than unites. J.D. Vance's story exemplifies position changes in American politics. Vance, who once publicly criticized and declared himself a never-Trump person, has undergone an astonishing transformation in his political stance. From calling Trump a disaster for politics and criticizing his message to the white working class as anti-conservative, Vance subsequently became part of the very system he once opposed. This change raises questions about consistency and principles in politics. Do politicians change their views because they genuinely change their beliefs, or are these strategic calculations for personal gain? Can voters trust the consistency of those they elect? The phenomenon of political pivoting isn't new, but the rapid and dramatic nature of these shifts in recent years has been particularly striking. When political figures make complete reversals on fundamental positions, it undermines public trust in the political system as a whole. The cynicism that results from such behavior contributes to voter apathy and a growing sense that politicians will say anything to gain or maintain power. For the democratic process to function effectively, citizens need to believe that their elected officials hold genuine convictions that guide their actions. When principles appear malleable and positions change with political winds, the foundation of representative democracy is weakened. In this context, voices like that of Representative Jasmine Crockett become particularly important. Crockett did not hesitate to harshly criticize what she saw as threats coming from within Congress itself. She accused some colleagues of spreading misinformation and causing division, endangering the country no less than threats from outside. We have people in this chamber that are actually causing just as much a threat, if not more, to our own country. They continue to peddle lies, and I'm tired of it, Crockett stated with a frankness rarely seen in the typically diplomatic political environment. Such strong criticisms reflect the deep division in today's American political landscape. When a representative publicly calls a former president a criminal and a thug in charge of the United States, it shows that political polarization has reached an alarming level. The significance of these internal critiques cannot be overstated. Throughout American history, the system of checks and balances has relied not just on institutional structures, but on individuals willing to speak truth to power, even when that power resides within their own party or chamber. These voices of resistance serve as essential guardians of democratic norms and principles, particularly during periods of intense polarization. However, the escalating rhetoric on both sides raises concerns about whether productive dialogue is still possible. When political discourse descends into accusations of criminal behavior and fundamental threats to democracy, finding common ground becomes increasingly difficult. The slogan, "Make America Great Again," has become one of the most famous political slogans in modern history. However, many analysts have questioned the true meaning behind this slogan. Is it a genuine political vision or just an effective marketing strategy? When analyzed more deeply, this slogan appears to rely on a form of vague nostalgia, a sense of longing for an idealized past that may never have existed as described. This creates a powerful political tool. It evokes emotions about a lost golden era, without needing to specify exactly when that was or how great it was. The effectiveness of this strategy cannot be denied. By calling for an undefined return to greatness, this slogan has attracted strong support from voters who feel dissatisfied with the present and nostalgic for a supposedly better past. The ambiguity allows individuals to project their own definitions of greatness onto the slogan, making it personally relevant to a wide range of voters with different priorities and concerns. The power of such messaging lies in its emotional appeal rather than its specific policy implications. It taps into a collective yearning for simplicity, clarity, and prosperity that many Americans feel has been lost in an increasingly complex and challenging world. This emotional connection can sometimes override rational analysis of whether proposed policies would actually recreate the imagined golden past. However, the important question is, have the implemented policies actually brought the American economy closer to the promised greatness? The stock market is one of the most closely monitored economic indicators. According to the data mentioned, the S&P 500 index fell by more than 15% after tariff measures against China were implemented. Thousands of small businesses have suffered billions of dollars in damage, and American consumers are feeling the real decline in income. Nevertheless, there are still claims that everything is fine and the market will recover. This creates a significant gap between official statements and the economic reality that people are experiencing. When government spokespersons appear in the media to assert that the ball is in China's court and they need to do business with the United States, it seems like an effort to shift responsibility outward rather than face the consequences of the policies applied. This disconnect between economic reality and political narrative creates a dangerous situation where policy decisions may be guided by maintaining a particular storyline rather than responding to actual economic conditions. When leaders refuse to acknowledge negative economic indicators, they may miss opportunities to make necessary adjustments to policies that are causing harm. Furthermore, economic impacts are not evenly distributed across the population. While some sectors or individuals might benefit from certain policies, others bear disproportionate costs. A comprehensive assessment of economic policies must consider these distributional effects rather than relying on aggregate measures that may mask significant hardships for particular groups or regions. The imposition of a 25% tariff on imported cars created a challenging situation for foreign automakers, especially Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. However, instead of being subdued by tariffs, Japanese companies demonstrated remarkable adaptability and strategic foresight. Toyota quickly ramped up hybrid production in Japan to meet the growing demand for fuel-efficient vehicles in America. This not only allowed them to maintain their market presence, but positioned them to capitalize on evolving consumer preferences for environmentally friendly transportation options. Their swift pivot demonstrated an understanding of market trends that extended beyond immediate tariff concerns. Honda cut production in North America and shifted to Southeast Asia, specifically Thailand and Vietnam, to avoid tariffs. This geographic diversification strategy minimized the impact of U.S.-specific trade policies while maintaining access to the lucrative American market. Their ability to rapidly reconfigure global production networks showcased the flexibility that global corporations have developed in response to trade uncertainties. Nissan seized the opportunity to jump into the affordable electric vehicle market, attracting price-conscious American buyers. By focusing on the growing EV segment, they weren't just responding to tariffs, but positioning themselves at the forefront of automotive industry transformation. Their approach demonstrated how trade challenges can accelerate innovation and strategic repositioning. Japanese manufacturers didn't just react to tariffs, but seized the opportunity to boost production of electric and hybrid vehicles, taking advantage of America's growing trend toward fuel efficiency and clean energy. Rather than engaging in a tariff war, they chose to optimize their supply chains and invest in technology, demonstrating a long-term strategic vision that transcended immediate trade disputes. Although tariffs were expected to be a magic solution for the U.S. auto industry, reality showed the opposite. High tariffs made American-made cars more expensive, and domestic manufacturers couldn't fill the gap left by Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Car dealerships across the United States are struggling with delayed deliveries and higher prices. Meanwhile, domestic sales haven't increased as expected. Japanese models still maintain an advantage with their reliability, fuel efficiency, and lower ownership costs. In fact, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and Mazda now control about 35% of the passenger car market in the U.S., with Toyota leading as the best-selling brand. This clearly shows how Japanese automakers have consistently met U.S. market demands while adapting to changing regulatory environments. This outcome highlights the complex reality of global trade and the unintended consequences that can result from protectionist measures. While tariffs were intended to give domestic manufacturers an advantage, they instead created supply chain disruptions and price increases that damaged dealer networks and constrained consumer choices, without delivering the promised renaissance in American auto manufacturing. Tariffs haven't just affected automakers but have devastated the entire U.S. supply chain. Parts suppliers and logistics companies closely tied to Japanese automakers are now facing sharp declines in orders, creating a domino effect throughout the economy. States like Michigan, Texas, and California, the heart of America's auto industry, are warning about job losses and declining revenues. Parts suppliers, manufacturing plants, and car dealerships are all feeling the pressure, contributing to growing economic instability in these key regions. The interconnected nature of modern manufacturing means that disruptions in one sector quickly spread to adjacent industries. Workers in seemingly unrelated fields find their livelihoods affected by policies targeted at specific imports. These ripple effects illustrate how traditional sector-based economic thinking fails to capture the complex web of relationships in modern economies. Moreover, the workforce impacts extend beyond immediate job losses to include reduced hours, canceled expansions, and postponed investments. Communities that depend on these industries face declining tax bases precisely when social services are most needed, creating fiscal challenges for local governments already operating with limited resources. One of the less mentioned but extremely important consequences of tariff policies is the impact on remote regions like Alaska. The 1,387-mile road connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States has become more expensive than ever due to tariff measures. For Alaska, a land already famous for having the highest cost of living in North America, everything from food to fuel will rise sharply in price. An average family in Alaska has to spend up to 10% of their income just on food and fuel, and now they're facing a significant hit to their wallets. This situation highlights how national trade policies can have dramatically different impacts across regions. The geographic isolation that already creates economic challenges for Alaska is exacerbated by trade measures designed with little consideration for the unique circumstances of non-contiguous states. The resulting cost increases aren't merely inconveniences, but fundamental threats to economic sustainability in regions with limited alternatives. Alaska's tourism industry, one of the region's key economic sectors, is in serious danger. Alaska tourism brings in about $2 billion annually, but if travel costs skyrocket, 25% of tourists will cancel their trips. Especially when Alaska Airlines, one of the main carriers from major cities to Alaska, increases ticket prices by 20% due to increased shipping fees. Cities like Juneau and Ketchikan, where tourism accounts for up to 40% of annual revenue, could see a 30% decline in revenue during the tourist season. If the situation doesn't improve, 8 to 10 million tourists could cancel their trips this year. The tourism ecosystem in Alaska would collapse, affecting countless hotels, tour guides, and related services that depend on predictable seasonal visitors for their economic survival. This example illustrates how policies designed to protect certain industries can inadvertently damage others. Tourism represents a significant portion of the U.S. service economy and provides employment opportunities in regions with limited industrial development. When trade policies increase transportation costs, they can undermine this vital sector, particularly in destinations that rely on affordable access. Companies like UPS and FedEx are facing a 15% increase in shipping costs in just one quarter. The entire global supply chain is being affected, and the damage could reach up to $1 billion in the next 3 months. Smaller companies certainly won't be able to survive this storm. The logistics sector serves as the circulatory system of the modern economy, moving goods from producers to consumers efficiently. When these networks face disruption and cost increases, the effects spread throughout the economy, raising prices for consumers and reducing competitiveness for American businesses in global markets. Furthermore, the logistics industry itself employs millions of Americans in roles ranging from warehouse workers to truck drivers. Cost pressures and volume reductions threaten these jobs and the communities that depend on them, creating economic insecurity that extends far beyond the immediate industry. Ford may have to cut production by at least 15–20% this year, potentially leading to a $2 billion loss in the next quarter. GM will also reduce car production by up to 100,000 units due to supply chain disruption. Car sales could drop by 10–15% simply because they can't get parts from Canada. These production cuts represent not just financial losses for corporations, but reduced work hours and potential layoffs for manufacturing employees. The auto industry has traditionally provided middle-class jobs with good benefits, particularly in regions with limited alternative employment options. Disruptions to this sector, therefore, have outsized social and economic impacts. Additionally, the reduced production affects local economies through decreased spending on everything from industrial supplies to employee lunches at local restaurants. The multiplier effect works in reverse during downturns, amplifying losses throughout regional economies dependent on manufacturing. Apple has announced that revenue from iPhone and MacBook products could drop by 5–8% if components aren't imported on time. Intel will also struggle to maintain microchip production if it can't get materials from Canada. Product shortages in the market are inevitable. The technology sector has been one of America's strongest economic engines, driving innovation and creating high-paying jobs across the country. When trade disruptions affect this industry, they threaten not just current economic activity but future competitiveness in fields that will define the 21st century economy. Moreover, technology products have become essential tools for productivity across all economic sectors. Shortages and price increases for these products create drag on overall economic performance, reducing efficiency and constraining growth in ways that extend far beyond the tech industry itself. The U.S.-Canada relationship now feels like a tense marriage. The friendly handshakes are long gone, replaced by sanctions back and forth. This deterioration in relations with one of America's closest allies and largest trading partners exemplifies how trade policies can damage diplomatic relationships that have been cultivated over decades. The analyses above demonstrate the importance of evaluating policies not just based on promises or political slogans, but on their actual impact on the economy and people's lives. When policy decisions are made based on political emotions or short-term interests rather than careful analysis, the consequences can be widespread and prolonged, affecting many industries and geographical regions. In today's globalized context, where economies are tightly intertwined, economic and foreign policies need to be considered within a broader framework, focusing on long-term stability and development rather than short-term victories or illusions about an idealized past. The complex interdependencies of modern supply chains mean that simplistic approaches to trade often create unintended consequences that can outweigh intended benefits. As citizens and consumers, we must develop the critical thinking skills necessary to distinguish between political rhetoric and economic reality. We need to demand evidence-based policymaking that acknowledges trade-offs and distributional impacts rather than simplistic narratives that promise pain-free solutions to complex challenges. Finally, people need to be able to distinguish between political strategy and economic reality, between promises and actual actions. Only then can we move toward a truly great future based on a solid foundation of truth, cooperation, and sustainable development that benefits all Americans, not just those in politically important sectors or regions. The path forward requires honest assessment of policy impacts, willingness to adjust course when evidence indicates problems, and a renewed commitment to building an economy that works for everyone. These principles transcend partisan divisions and speak to fundamental values of fairness, transparency, and shared prosperity that most Americans continue to embrace despite our current divisions.